Big, bad, rumbly V8s. Rear-wheel drive. And a chassis about as refined as a PBR. Muscle cars are the American dream on wheels, but with today's market prices, they're pretty much mostly a dream.
Wake the f*** up, samurai.
We have cheap muscle cars to buy.
You see, with the death of the V8 engine just weeks away in America, prices for muscle cars are going through the roof. But lucky you, you're watching Ideal Cars, so you know we're gonna tell you about some cheap-ass muscly boys that you can buy on regular people's salaries. Now, first up is a car I talked about recently because it makes a great drift car, but it's also just a badass muscle car to own. It's one of the misfit muscle cars from the age of the gas crisis, but thanks to a burgeoning aftermarket community, this compact little pony has earned quite a name for itself. Look, the original Mustang was an American classic, but by the time the late 70s had rolled around, the Stang had changed. This was no longer the same pony car. It was now a short, stubby hatchback. And originally, it didn't even come with a 5.0 liter V8. You see, thanks to the gas crisis, the Mustang had to go through some turbulent times. So why is this Stang on my list of good muscle cars? Well, because it still had a little bit of fight left in it. And as time went on, the Mustang got its mojo back. Over time, visual changes were implemented to bring back the Mustang's look. Those changes certainly helped, but what really brought the Mustang back was the return of the V8. So sure, it didn't really look like a muscle car, but it was still a muscle car underneath. Finally, the Fox body was more of the Mustang that everybody remembered. But for a long time, it remained one of the black sheep of the Mustang lineup. But that doesn't mean the Fox body is a flop. Today, people are modifying the hell out of these. Getting 400 horsepower out of that 5.0 is no big deal. Drag racers, drifters, track day cars, this is basically the Miata of the muscle car world. And most importantly, why it's on this list? Sure, it's great, but it's damn cheap. In my research, I was able to find plenty of these for sale at or under 10,000 bucks. And frankly, that's a pretty killer deal. Now my next muscle car is less at home at the drag strip and more maybe at your local car cruise. But don't let that stop you, these are still great classic American muscle cars. Making its first appearance all the way back in the 1960s, the G-body chassis found itself being used in a wide variety of GM luxury cars, and the Malibu was one of the best ones. Look, like pretty much everything else on this list, this thing has a freaking V8, rear-wheel drive, and a stick shift. You know what that means. Why should you want a Malibu? Well, because they can be modified both inside and out to be exactly what you need. You may not be thinking of them, but you have seen Malibus in everything. Slammed, donked, drag racing, and just beautiful classic muscle cars. The possibilities with a Malibu are nearly endless. And of course, the reason it's on this list is because it comes in at a decent price. We were able to find one that already has a 454 for under 10,000 bucks. So yes, while the Malibu isn't everyone's first thought when it comes to muscle cars, I still think it's a good buy if you're in the market. Our next car is pretty similar to the Malibu. In fact, it's based off the same chassis. One of the very many brothers of the Malibu is the Buick Regal. So yeah, pretty much everything from the Malibu applies to the Regal, except for that it's a Buick, so it's a little more cushy. The Regal, much like its name implies, was more elegant, had more luxury. But underneath the hood lied what was known as the 3800, a V6 power plant known as one of the best in American history. Those of you in the muscle car know might recognize the Regal name as it also came turbocharged later on, and of course, the iconic Grand National. The infamous, evil, turbocharged V6 muscle car that came from when muscle cars were dying. Unfortunately, of course, you ain't getting a GNX on this list. But for under 10 grand, we were able to find one with a V8. Now sure, this isn't the Grand National, but this V8 can be modified with ease. So if you don't feel like a Malibu, maybe the Regal might appeal to you. Now I know none of you were probably thinking Buick Regal or Chevy Malibu, but one muscle car you're probably all thinking about is a fucking Camaro. Some would say it's the yin to the Mustang's yang. And look, this car is actually going to be a pretty divisive one, because I'm going to recommend you buy the Catfish. Look, the muscle cars of the 90s era are all pretty interesting, to say the least. But despite how it looks, The 95 Camaro, otherwise known as the Catfish, it should definitely be on your list, particularly the V8 powered Z28 package. Not only are they cheap as hell thanks to their stupid plastic construction, but they're one of the most easy to modify cars on this entire list. If you can look past all those 90s GM charms and ugliness, the Catfish Camaro is one of the best and cheapest ways to get into the world of high horsepower V8 fun. I was able to find a pretty decent example for under 10,000 bucks. Yeah, sure, it's not the T-top coupe or whatever, but this is everything you need to have the most fun in a muscle car, at least while you're sitting inside of it and not looking at it from the outside. Now, if I were to ask you what is the best muscle car ever, I bet a few of you would be willing to answer Corvette. Well, good news, you might be able to actually afford one. Coming from the generation of synth pop and neon, the C4 Corvette represented a whole new breed of sports car coming out of Chevy. The C4 Corvette was a complete rebirth from the C3, and I don't think you're gonna find a car that looks more 80s in terms of styling than the C4. This is also around the time that they started using plastics in the body of the Corvette. You know, the same stuff to make G.I. Joes? The C4 wasn't just special because of its style, though. The liquid digital display in the dash was completely revolutionary at the time. So if you love arcade games and calculator watches, I think the C4 Corvette is right up your alley. But looks aren't everything. The C4 Corvette is of course powered by an L-Series V8. And if you don't know about how modifiable the L-Series V8 is, you're a fucking idiot and you don't belong on this channel. Get out. Just kidding, stay, we like you. Now, if you know me or you've watched Ideal Cars at all, you know one of our favorite car features ever is, of course, the pop-up headlights, and the C4 Corvette is rocking them. So yes, while the styling might be dated and the cassette player might not work anymore, popping those headlights never gets old. So what does all this 80s excellence cost you? Well, you're not gonna believe it, but we were able to find a couple of C4 Corvettes in decent shape for under 10,000 bucks, just like everything else on this list. So if you want to feel like your grandfather did back in 1982, get yourself a cheap C4 and hit the open road. Now, most of the cars on this list have been old as hell. What if you want modern amenities and muscle car power? Or maybe you need to drag a safe through the streets of Brazil. Then you, my friend, want a Dodge Charger. The Dodge Charger back in its original days was one of the best known muscle cars, and today, it's still one of the best known muscle cars. But thankfully, they're not so well known that they've become expensive. These are actually kind of a oft-forgotten muscle car of the modern era. The brand new revitalized Charger from the early 2000s made some pretty big departures from its origins, becoming the muscly four-door muscle car that everyone that signed up for the military straight out of high school bought on their first day. But thankfully, Dodge still does dodgy things, and even the Charger was still badass, as tame as it had become. So yes, today's Charger is a four-door family sedan, but it's still a muscle car underneath, meaning you kind of get the best of both worlds, practicality and power. And of course, you're probably on this list looking for cheap cars because you want to modify them, and the Charger is there for you, baby. There is just no limit to what you can do with that Hemi engine. But whether you want a drag car, a track car, a big old family drift sedan, or just something to get the groceries a little quicker, there's an aftermarket community out there for your Charger that will speak to you. And because they're not really that desirable, they're still dirt cheap today. Almost criminally cheap. Especially when you know that some of them came as decommissioned cop cars. How badass is that? Now, Dodge is still doing dodgy things today. But one company that did not survive the struggle was Pontiac, which is really sad because Pontiac was such a big part of American muscle car culture for generations. But luckily, you can still enjoy some of that muscle car heritage today on the cheap. You see, near the end of Pontiac's days, Pontiac was struggling to sell some family cars as well as keep their muscle car heritage alive. They ultimately failed, but their loss is your gain. The Pontiac Grand Prix was Pontiac's attempt to hold on to its glory days. Now, not all Pontiac Grand Prix came with a big muscly V8. You're gonna want an 05 or later that's known as the GXP. 4 doors, V8, Pontiac badge, sounds great, right? Well, there's one problem. They're front wheel drive. But hey, there's some of you out there that hear big V8 on the cheap, I don't care which wheels it powers. And for those of you, the Pontiac Grand Prix GXP is for you. And look, surprise, surprise, guess the price of it, huh? It's under 10,000 bucks, just like every other car on this list. You know, prices vary, but you're gonna get one for under 10,000 bucks. All right, now, bear with me here. Before we get to our last muscly muscle car on this list, I'm going to suggest something that I think is kind of a muscle car that ain't American.
Doesn't make any sense.
I'm going to recommend that if you want the muscle car experience without all the, you know, Confederate flags, you consider buying a BMW 6 Series. I bet you weren't expecting that. But look, everything that makes a muscle car great is here in the 6 Series. It's big, it's dumb, it's got a V8, it's rear-wheel drive, it's got a stick shift, and a shitload of horsepower. That is everything you need to be a muscle car except for the American flag. And hell, this is gonna have one hell of a nicer interior than a Dodge Charger. As long as you ignore the BMW iDrive, just go ahead and burn that in a fire. So yes, if you're here for a lot of horsepower, rear-wheel drive, and a lot of fun, and nothing on this list is speaking to you, you can get yourself a BMW 6 Series for around 10 to 15,000 bucks and have just as much fun as anything else on this list. And be a lot more comfortable while you do it. Just, don't say I didn't warn you about taking it to the mechanic. And now it's time for the last car on our list. The best muscle car bargain you can buy right now. You wanna have the most muscly muscles? You wanna have the most funny funs? And you want to have the most horsepower-y horsepowers for the least amount of money? Buy an 05 to a 2011 Ford fucking Mustang. Yeah, I already brought up a cheap Mustang on this list, but this is a new one with, like, you know, speakers and air conditioning that works. You see, the 05 Mustang was considered as a return to form for the pony car. It was one of the better looking Mustangs that had come out in a long time. We suffered through some damn ugly ones. It was squared off and muscular and had that fastback roof from the 60s. This is one of the best muscle cars you can buy right now for under, 15,000 bucks. You get a V8, you get the Ford badge, you get a good looking modern contemporary design, you get an interior that's not full of holes and rats. You get the quintessential V8 rear-wheel drive manual muscle car experience. You get an endless amount of modification. You get an endless amount of wheels, tires, body kits, superchargers, whatever the hell you want to throw on this thing. This generation of V8 Mustang is everything you need out of a muscle car. You don't even really need to modify it. You can buy one of these and enjoy it and live the American muscle car dream right out of the box. So that is my list of badass dirt cheap muscle cars you can buy today and start doing burnouts in tomorrow. Just, budget in a little bit of money for some gas and some tires. Or if you're getting the BMW, budget in 3 times your budget for, fixing the air conditioner. The options for cheap muscle cars are practically limitless. Let me know down below which cars I missed. I'll probably make another one of these, and I'll probably make a better list. So let me know what cars you'd like to see in it, and I will make it for you. Until then, like the video, don't bother disliking, you can't see how many dislikes there are. Subscribe to Ideal Cars down below, and as always, it's been ideal hanging out with you guys and showing you these cars. See you later.